Hi, it's Heidi Gray McGill, and I am here today with Aimee Lilly, the narrator of my books, and I am super excited to introduce her to you. Aimee has just completed Deep in My Heart, the prequel to my Discerning God's Best series, and I am super, super excited to get this to you in a new format. So today I want to introduce her to you. Aimee, welcome.
Thank you so much, Heidi. It's such an honor to be able to join you, to meet you today, and to be able to introduce this book and to begin this series and to have the opportunity to give your characters a voice. That's what I'm most excited about, is to be able to I know you have a lot of loyal listeners, and to be able to give your characters their voices and to be able to have people be able to hear them and get to know them in a new way is something I'm very excited about. So thank you
Well,
for that opportunity. And thanks for this chance to just get to chat with you and to get to know you and to have people be able to get to know me a little bit. It's a great chance to do that today.
wonderful. Well, I'll tell you, doing the voice, when you say give my character's voice, oh, you captured them so well. And I was very excited. In fact, one of the reasons I approached you about narrating my books was because I had heard you narrate another person's book. And the moment you sang, I said, I know that she is my girl. So I'm so glad. This has been almost a 2-year process of us connecting and then being able to get our schedules together. And so, mostly on my part. So, I'm really excited that we're going to do this. But tell me a little bit about narration. For example, how did you get started?
Well, it's a fun story, and it's a little convoluted. If you don't mind my telling
We have the
the
time.
story, okay, great. Because it's not only a fun story, but it's a marvelous story of God's providence and how He works behind the scenes to show exactly what He wants to do and to work things as He plans them. Um, I went to college at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and I was originally planning on being a voice major. And then I decided, because singers and voice majors have to work, they have to practice. And I thought, I don't want to do that. And so I went into the broadcasting major because I thought, well, that sounds easy. Um, and so I, but I love singing, as you mentioned. I do sing in many of the audiobooks that I do. And so I was in the mixed singing group, the chorale. And every Christmas, the Moody mixed all of the singing groups and all of the music groups, as well as the band, did a huge Christmas pageant called Candlelight Carols.
Mm,
And my second year at Moody was the narrator for the Christmas pageant.
mhm.
And it was broadcast on the radio. And one of the guys at the radio station heard me do the narration and called me and said, would you be interested in coming up to the radio station and recording a couple of commercials? And I said, sure, that sounds like fun. So I came up and did so. And one of them was one of those spots where you have a couple of women sitting around the kitchen table, drinking a cup of coffee and, laughing. And it was for Today in the Word, their devotional. And one of the other guys who worked at the radio station heard that and called me and said, we're going to be doing some new 2-minute radio dramas called Just a Minute. And would you be interested in coming up and being involved in those? And I said, sure, that sounds like fun. So I went up and was involved in those. And that led to me doing an internship in radio drama for the Saturday Night Alive players. Saturday Night Alive was the radio broadcast of Ron Hutchcraft, who was a youth minister, who worked for, in youth ministry for decades and had a radio program on Moody Broadcasting. And so I was part of the radio drama troupe for that radio show. I then started working in radio up at the radio station as well. So I was involved in all of that broadcasting type thing. I started doing radio drama, which is where all of the voices and the ability to create all of the characters came from.
Mhm.
Then a few years later, the company that I still work for, Oasis Audio, then named Domain Communications, decided that they wanted to get in on the ground floor of this brand new field called audiobooks. Up until that time, it was only for the blind. It was
Right.
just people would record them for the blind, but otherwise, it wasn't something that was done in mainstream production. But it was starting to be something that people were like, hey, why can't we do this? Why can't I have an audiobook to listen to in my car on the way to work? And so Domain decided that they wanted to get in on the ground floor of this new field and wanted to create a package that they could pitch to production houses, book production houses, and say, or publishing houses rather, and say, we will produce your book in audio. Here's how much it would cost to do it per cassette, because that was what it was at the time. This is way before CDs were normal. Every car had a cassette player, not a CD player. So it's how much it would cost per cassette. Here's 3 men and 3 women. Choose your voice. Tell us how long it is. We'll tell you how much it would cost, and we'll produce it for you. And they came to me and said, would you like to be one of the women in this package? And I said, sure, that sounds like fun.
Fun.
I don't know what this is, but okay. And so, sure enough, we started. And the first couple of audiobooks I did were single cassette. Um, One was Hind's Feet on High Places, and one was a very abridged biography of Fanny Crosby. It was one cassette. Um, but that was the mid 90s. And since then, I have done approximately just over 300 audiobooks. I still work with Oasis Audio, but the Lord did all of that, and amazingly, he has worked behind the scenes all this time. And ironically, the voice that I have, which is what he has used to do this audio, um, I got as a result of strep throat in 7th grade. I I was a soprano in the choir, and I got strep throat and went to a football game and screamed my little heart out
Mhm.
and blistered my vocal cords. And a week later, I was the first alto and dropping. And so my voice had changed like a boy's. And
Yeah.
so I just kept working it lower and lower and lower. But it turned out I had gotten nodules like Kim Carnes and Rod Stewart and all of these people. But instead of ruining my voice, it gave me this voice that I have. But that's the way the Lord chose to do what he's done. And so that's how he got me on this path, and he's moved me forward. And so now it's about 30 years and approximately 300 audiobooks. And it was all his work.
Wow, this is super exciting. So that is the best story that I've heard in a long time, and mostly because I did not realize truly that it had only been since about the 90s. For me,
Mhm.
it feels like it's been forever, but it's part of my generation moving from the 8-track to the cassette tape to that is just amazing what has happened so
Right.
quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very new. And it doesn't feel that way.
No, it does
But
not.
but yeah, that was right at the ground floor, right in the mid 90s is when we started really mass producing them.
Wow. Well, I understand that you've had some pretty unique opportunities, such as playing the part of Hattie in the Left Behind series, and also one of my favorites, the Sugar Creek Gang. I loved those books. Tell me about that experience.
Oh, you know what? I grew up reading the Sugar Creek Gang, and as a matter of fact, listening to the radio drama.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the great things was being able to, um, when I was doing the Just a Minute radio dramas, I got to work alongside some of the actors from the radio drama of the Sugar Creek Gang, Dragonfly and Little
Mhm,
Jim, and
mhm.
so many of them are still my friends. So to be able to then do the first 16, I think, or 18 of the Sugar Creek Gang books, which I had read as a child and then listened to. That was a dream come true
Oh,
for me. I just loved doing them. And to be able to play Hattie in the Left Behind series, that was a joy. I just loved doing that. It was a powerful series, and the actors and actresses that I worked alongside were amazing. It was a fabulous opportunity. I just loved every minute of that. Radio drama really is my first love.
okay.
And so being able to use all of that ability, the characterizations and the acting
Mhm.
in the audiobooks that I do, creating all of those characters and using all of those voices, it's one of the great things that to be able to wed those in doing the audiobooks is just, it's so much fun. And it's one of the fun things about the audiobook narration.
Well, I've really appreciated how you were able to distinguish characters in a flow of multiple characters in a short section to be able to hear the difference of who is speaking. Is it Melvin? Is it Melvin's father? Is it the lawyer? Is it the servant? Who is it? There's never a question in my mind of who is speaking, and oh, that's just glorious. So I
Thank you.
understand you really like that part, but what else about audiobooks do you enjoy from your standpoint?
I think one of my favorite things is simply that as we have gone on, and a big part of that is big part of what I'm about to say is the fault of my generation. uh, we have we've lost the use of our imagination. um and I'm a Gen Xer. We are the MTV generation. We're the ones who started the music video, 3 minute attention span.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
And as we've gone on, we have started to lose the ability to concentrate. We've started to lose the ability to imagine. And I love audiobooks because um, they spark the theater of the mind.
mhm.
Reading is one of my passions. I am a voracious reader. I have been since I was a child. My parents um, taught me to read before I started kindergarten, and I fell in love with the written word. My dad would read us stories. He would read, most parents read to their children, but he would read us The Hobbit and The Chronicles of Narnia. So it wasn't just The Hungry Hungry Caterpillar, which obviously is a great book, but
Mhm.
we learned to love literature.
Yes.
And so I have loved reading.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's a way of helping other people discover this passion of how exciting it is to live inside another world, to imagine what else is, this broader world of literature. And if I can help bring that to life in someone else's mind with my voice and the characters and the accents and acting it out, then I consider that a job well done. And so everything I do, and two, another facet of that is I've done over 100 of the Boxcar Children stories.
Oh,
And I've heard so many people, so many parents say that they're some of their children's first chapter books or early chapter
mhm.
books. And so the kids are reading the books while listening to me tell the story.
Yeah.
And it's not only helping them develop their reading ability and their reading skills, but again, it's improving their imagination and helping them to grow in their love for the written word. So, on a purely practical note, it's developing these skills, but it's also to help spark imagination and spark a love for reading, which I
Yeah.
feel like we're losing in today's screen heavy society.
Yes. So, with such a large variety of books that you enjoy, how do you choose the specific books that you're willing to narrate?
Ironically, I have not had to do a lot of choosing
We
because
find you.
yeah, yes, and the Lord does that for me. Heidi. It's again a tale of God's providence. I have found it so amazing every single time I have seen a book out there, whether it's an opportunity to audition. If I've seen a book out there somewhere where I've thought, I really want to do that, and I have gone after that, the Lord has said, nope, not going to let it.
Wow.
But I have been sitting at home and gotten emails from random authors, AKA Heidi Brainhill, who have said, I heard you do another book and I would love to have you narrate mine. Um, and so the Lord has just basically made it abundantly clear, this is not your career.
Yes.
This is my ministry through you. And I will give you exactly the books I want you to narrate. And what I don't want you to narrate, you're not going to get no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you pursue it. So there are times it's nerve-wracking because there have been times I mean, it's really feast or famine. There
Yeah.
have been times I've just had absolutely nothing. But then there are times I think I can't keep up with what the Lord is bringing me right now.
Yeah.
But the wonderful thing is I know that I can trust that
Mhm.
what he gives me will glorify him and he wants me to have because and I pray that when there are things that come along where I'm not sure, I just pray, Lord, if this won't glorify you, then don't let me get it. And he will close that door
Mhm.
and I can trust that. But the wonderful thing too is that there isn't a lot of, oh, is this going to be okay? Is this something I want? Because he brings them or he doesn't bring them. And it's been that way the whole of this 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, you are obviously using your talents for the Lord. So one of the things that I think is pretty interesting is how you make each character super, super unique. How do you get into a character's head and how do you figure out what their voice is going to sound like?
Oh, you know, it's how I get into their head is just simply as I'm reading, because I try to pre-read every book before I start recording.
Mhm.
We've had a couple of embarrassing moments where I haven't done that, and I've gotten a couple of chapters in only to discover that the character I've been giving a Southern accent is actually, from New York, or that I've been giving a
Minnesota.
Hispanic accent is,
Mhm.
Midwestern.
Right.
So,
Right.
that's happened and we've had to go back and then re-record and try not to do that. So, but as I'm reading the book, I make notes about each character so that I have a kind of a fleshed out image of who they are and a description of them. Um, and it's not just their visual, but who they are. Um, and then it's kind of a gut feeling of what would that sound like? How does that how can I make that come across? How can I communicate that with my voice? And fortunately or unfortunately, there's no visual aspect to this. I can't cock an eyebrow. I can't hunch my shoulders. Although I do that when I'm recording it.
Mhm.
When I'm doing the narration, when I do a certain character, I will sometimes, every time they come up, I'll do a certain physical motion because it just helps get the voice across. And I'm doing it right now. I'm seeing myself. Stop it. But um, but it's that when I put it all together, it's what communicates that characterization. What is it about that? And if the character is unkind or cruel, then there has to be a thread of that
Mhm.
in the voice.
Yeah.
But if it's someone that you don't know is unkind or cruel, but that I know and you don't, do I want to hint at that?
Mm.
Do I want that to somehow come across subconsciously? And if so, how do I communicate that? It's all these subtleties that thankfully, again, those years of acting
Yes.
allow me to try to do. And then of course there's all the accents and the different pitches and the ranges and the, where do I put my mouth and how do I do this in order to change, and the number of characters too. It's funny. There was one book I did where there were 87 characters, and eventually it's like, I'm only one mouth. How many different positions can I put my mouth in order to do all of these characters? But it's amazing how many different ones you can eventually come up with.
So who's been your most challenging character?
You know, it's men. It's men, because I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I can only come up with so many male characters. But actually it's Scottish. I did a book. I did a book for Laura France. Laura
I think
Francis.
that's the one I read.
Okay, yeah, it was A Bound Heart.
Yeah.
And it was set in Scotland, and that's the one where there were 87 characters all told, including all of the bit characters. And I had never been able to do a Scottish accent, even though I'm half Scottish. And I thought, I am going to die. This will be the death of me. But praise the Lord, I managed to come up with it. I spent weeks working, reading street signs as I'm driving downtown. And my husband would be like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm acting. Never mind. Just ignore me." But I got it. I managed to come up with a Glaswegian accent. I hope nobody ever wants Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Because Glasgow is the only one I've got.
Well, I'm going to challenge you with my Irish ones, but it's all going to be good. That is marvelous, and how super fun. Now, you mentioned about as a teenager having struggles with your voice. Is there any voice that's difficult to do physically?
Yes. That would be the youngest child of the Boxcar Children, Benny.
Which is this. This is Benny's voice. And we picked this voice before we realized I was going to be doing them for like 15 or 20 years.
The hard voices are the ones that are raspy. And so I try not to do them often, but sometimes, again, when there's so many characters, and especially male voices, that thankfully, because I have a low voice, I can push my male voices down like this, and I can go quite low. But especially if they're male villains, where you've got, or if they're described as a raspy voice.
Yeah.
If the author says a raspy voice, then I've got to give him a raspy voice. But anytime you have something like this, that hurts.
Yeah.
Those are difficult to produce because it's your vocal cords actually doing this. So anytime anyone hears a narrator creating this type of sound,
or this, anything that sounds like this,
that's actually causing a physical sensation like this in your vocal cord. So that's actually causing pain. But praise the Lord, we have cough drops and honey and lemon, and we drink a lot of those during sessions.
I would think so. So tell me a little bit about your sessions. How do you record? Is this something you do in your home, or do you have to go to someplace else to do this, a recording studio?
I actually go to a studio with an engineer. There are a lot of people now who do record at home. When I started, that was not an option. And because I've been doing it so long, my preference is to do it in a studio with an engineer. You get a better product that way because my engineer, whose name is Adam Hassel, I want to give him a shout out because he is amazing.
Yes.
You have heard his product. I have been working with him for 10, 12 years now, and he is fabulous, and I am so grateful for him. But Adam is not just my engineer, he's also my producer. So he is following along with the script. So if I say a word wrong, he'll catch it.
Okay.
And then there are also times where I will say a line and he'll stop me and say, you can do that better. Or, why don't you try it this way? I think, there should be more emotion here. Or why don't you, he's responding to this. I'm not sure if you caught this feeling that he could, that this character could be portraying. And he's always right. So those are things that when you're doing it by yourself at home, you're trying to do everything. You're doing the engineering, you're doing your own proofreading, you're doing your own QC. You don't catch your own mistakes as often. When you have an engineer, he's focused on one thing, you're focused on another. And so after all these years, my strong preference is always to go into the studio and have an engineer.
So then what's your biggest challenge then?
My biggest challenge is just simply the physical side of it. People always say, oh, I would love to do audiobooks. It just sounds like so much fun. I love to read. People say I have a great voice and I love to read, so I think it would be a blast. And I'm sure you do have a great voice and it is fun, but it's also exhausting.
Yes.
Because what you're doing is you're sitting alone in a small room, in usually a pretty uncomfortable chair, talking to yourself for hours. And you have to sit up straight. You can't slouch. You can't just be comfortable. The mic picks up absolutely every movement. It picks up your clothes rustling against themselves. It picks up your stomach growling, which is really embarrassing. And my stomach growls a lot because you're drinking a lot of water. And every time you start drinking water, you get air. And so every time your stomach rumbles, it picks up your mouth noises. It picks up my knee cracking, which happens a lot. Because I know this whole, as we get older, our joints start to
more mature. As we get more mature.
Right. Yes. As we become more mature, our joints start to crack. So every time my knee pops, Adam's like, "Whoa, what was that?" Every time you can't move on the chair because that makes noises, and then your mouth gets dry, and then that starts to make crackling noises in the mic, and so you have to stop and you have to drink more water. And as you drink more water, your stomach starts growling, and then you have to go to the bathroom because you're drinking more water, and it's just tiring. So you're doing it, you're talking on mic, listening to yourself, and you can hear everything. You can hear every mouth noise, and it's also, you're self-conscious because you can hear everything so closely. So a lot of people, like I say, they're always like, oh, it would be so much fun. Well, it is, but it's also work.
So have you had to re-record anything for like blooper examples?
I routinely have to re-record. As a matter of fact, the process for recording is just simply that you keep going until you make a mistake, and then you stop and you back up to the beginning of the sentence or the last time that you had a long enough pause for the engineer to be able to punch in. And if you make a big enough mistake, then you stop and you laugh and you wait until you can get your composure. And
like being in church.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And unfortunately, we don't keep blooper reels. But I will tell you that there are times that you will record the same thing 5, 6, 7 times and just absolutely not be able to get it right. And sometimes it's because a sentence is particularly complex. Sometimes it's because of a combination of consonants that just don't go together. She sells seashells type of things that where the author had no idea that the way they phrased it would come out that way because they are not thinking audio.
Right.
or a word that looks perfectly benign, but the way it comes out in audio is just sounds very, very wrong. And sometimes it's just simply because your tongue and your brain are not working together. And then eventually you're like, that's it, I'm done. I'm getting up, I'm walking away, because if I don't take a break now, this book is never going to finish. So yeah, it's like normal conversation, but you're recording it for posterity, and you can hear yourself in your headphones, and your engineer eventually just stops and looks at you and says, what do you even, or if he's like Adam, eggs you on.
I can see that.
Yes, yes. So yeah, it's, in everyday conversation, we all have moments where we're like, I can't, I give up now. But when you're doing it and you can hear yourself in your headphones and you have to get it right, yeah, it's like when you're sitting in church and you just absolutely cannot stop that laugh from coming out.
Oh, goodness.
Like those moments.
You have already recorded the prequel to my Discerning God's Best series, Deep in My Heart.
Yes.
So, what was one of your favorite scenes to record in that book?
I loved the when they get, it's basically the climax, when they're wrapping things up at the end of the book, when they have learned everything that they can, when Melvin has learned everything that he can from the slaves on the plantation, and have in return taught everything that they can, that there's been this marvelous relationship that has grown, that the Lord, when you've seen what the Lord has done through this accidental circumstance, and seen the love that has grown, and seen the trust, that seeing that climax, and seeing that the way that the story built to that, and seeing that the way the Lord brought that about, and the trust that came in two men that could not make eye contact, now being able to greet each other as brothers, to pray for each other, to love each other as family. That brought tears to my eyes. And I am when you hear me cry in an audiobook, I'm genuinely crying. Just for those that listen, if you hear when a character is crying and I'm narrating it, I'm genuinely crying, and I'm going to have to stop and blow my nose. And it was legitimate. That was so moving, because it's such a real picture. It is such a real picture of what God does, for he has broken down the wall. That is exactly what he does. There is no slave nor free. There is no Jew nor Gentile. There is no man nor woman. We are all one in Christ Jesus. And that is exactly what he does. And to see that written in that book, and to see the reality, it was so meaningful to me. And to be able to narrate that, knowing that this is exactly what the gospel does, it was so meaningful. And I loved being able to narrate that and to bring it to life, knowing that it's just a picture of truth. So yeah, that was just, Heidi, I loved being able to bring that to life.
Thank you.
And I really hope that when your readers and listeners hear that they can hear the conviction in my voice.
Yes.
Just speaking the truth.
You brought it to life for me. It's one thing to hear it in my own head, but then when I heard it in yours, it just made goosebumps, and was just, what a wonderful, wonderful way to portray what my brain brought to life. Your voice just made it real.
I'm so glad. That is a huge compliment, because like I said, it brought me to tears when I read it, and then again when I narrated it.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure being with you. Is there anything else that you would like to add? I'm very thankful that you mentioned Adam. He is a wonderful man, truly gifted. I'm excited to be a part of what he is doing. But is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I would just like to say that I am thrilled to be partnering with you in this journey. I am looking forward to doing the rest of the Discerning God's Best series.
Yeah.
And I would love to invite your listeners and your readers, well, your readers, but the listeners, to join us on this ride. It's a wonderful adventure. Audiobooks are a fabulous opportunity to just fire your imagination. And I would also say that it's a great way to interest new people, new readers, new listeners,
Yeah.
because there are a lot of people who don't like to read, but who will listen to an audiobook.
Yeah.
And so if you have a friend who might enjoy, who doesn't know Heidi's books, but might enjoy listening to an audiobook, this is a great opportunity to introduce them to her.
Thank you.
Because she's fabulous. I can
Thank you.
testify to that. And, a lot of people will say, hey, you know what? I don't like to read, but they'll listen to an audiobook in the car.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, speaking
Right.
as a narrator, this is a great opportunity to just say, hey, well, if you don't want to read, can I just
Yeah.
say her books are coming out in audio? So
Yeah. It's also, to me, it's a brand new mission field.
yes.
And the quality of the reader is very important. I am an avid book reader and audiobook listener, and I have turned off a book before that I knew the book was quality, but the narrator was not. And so in choosing you to be the voice of my characters, I know I have a quality product that is truly going to interest some people, and they may not be followers of Jesus Christ or even know. But through the stories, I'm hoping that your voice will portray my thoughts and that they will see Christ on the page.
Amen. Amen. That is my prayer as well. May the Lord take these books and these audiobooks and just use them for his glory.
Yes.
The great opportunity to share the gospel, to bring new people in, and may we find new believers in heaven, new friends in heaven
Oh, yes.
that have come along because of these books. That's our prayer.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aimee, for being with us. And
Oh,
thank
you're
you,
so welcome.
listener. I appreciate everyone being here today and following us on this journey. I will put some links to Aimee and the other books that she's narrated or been a part of so that you can follow her as well. The most important thing for me to say to you today is thank you. I appreciate you for being supportive. If you would take a moment, please, and hit the like button and possibly even subscribe, I would genuinely appreciate that courtesy. Just like when you leave a review for a book on Amazon, you can also leave a comment below, and that would be very helpful. The last thing that I had to say is that the book, the prequel, Deep in My Heart, is only available in audiobook and ebook format when you sign up for my newsletter. You can do that at HeidiGrayMcGill.com. Also, you will be able to find all my other books that are listed there, and this link will certainly be on my website as well. Thanks for listening.